The board of the Ludvig Holberg Memorial Fund awards the annual Holberg International Memorial Prize for outstanding scholarly work in the arts and humanities, social science, law, and theology. The prize is awarded to researchers who have made an outstanding contribution, either within one of the fields alone or of an interdisciplinary nature. The laureate must have had a decisive influence on international research in the field, for example, by developing new theories, knowledge, or insight, or through the innovative use of existing theories or methods. The board of the Ludvig Holberg Memorial Fund selects the laureate on the basis of the recommendation of the Holberg Prize Academic Committee, which consists of outstanding scholars in the relevant fields. The prize is worth 4.5 million Norwegian kroner, equivalent to about 591,000 euros or 775,000 American dollars. The Holberg International Memorial Prize for 2013 is awarded to Professor Bruno Latour. Bruno Latour was born in France in 1947. He studied philosophy and subsequently anthropology. From 1982 until 2006, he was professor at the Centre de Sociologie de l'Innovation at the École Nationale Supérieure des Mines in Paris. He has also been a visiting professor at the University of California, San Diego, the London School of Economics and Harvard University, and from 2007 until 2012, he was vice president of research at Sciences Po in Paris, where he is currently a professor. Bruno Latour has undertaken an ambitious analysis and reinterpretation of modernity, challenging the most fundamental categories, such as the distinction between modern and pre-modern, nature and society, human and non-human. He has completely reimagined science studies, pioneering new ethnographic methods and introducing new concepts and possibilities of communication to engage in collective research projects. He combines empirical methods and observation with the unsettling of concepts, reconfiguring the organization of knowledge and inviting participation. His influence has been felt internationally and well beyond the social study of science, in history, art history, philosophy, anthropology, geography, theology, literature, and legal studies. The first of a series of groundbreaking books, Laboratory Life 1979, co-authored with Stephen Woolgar and undertaken in the Salk Institute Laboratory, set the standard for ethnographic analysis of the making of scientific facts. Subsequent research leading to Les Microbes or the Pasteurization of France 1984 and Science in Action 1987 represents some of the most important work in the field of science studies and in the social history of knowledge. These studies span microbiology, primatology, and the history of exploration, engineering, and statistics, as well as the politics of knowledge. In We Have Never Been Modern in 1991, Latour offered his major polemical statement of his version of the social order. His work in the 1980s established actor network theory as a widely used methodology. During the 1990s, he conducted several major research projects. One of these dealt with the shortcomings of the French transport system, Aramis, or the Love of Technology, 1992. Another project was an ethnographic study of the French administrative court system, The Making of Law, 2002. Further study of administrative techniques and technical judgment urged the importance of local and specific moments and places for understanding issues of political legitimacy and juridical rights. His enterprises in museology, aesthetics, and digital humanities led to spectacular museum exhibitions, Iconoclash 2002 and Making Things Public 2005, producing debate and participation around themes of public knowledge. Latour's engagement in environmental issues and climate change led to Politics of Nature 1999, in which he proposed a parliament of things and asked how to bring democracy into science. His most recent book, Inquiry into Modes of Existence 2012, extends this debate into the field of creative metaphysics. Here, his thinking about the dualism between mind and matter becomes deeper and more flexible as he addresses communication and interaction between different positions, places, and realities. The project has a digital life, emphasizing the collectivity of this threshold inquiry and pointing toward the future. Bruno Latour is creative, imaginative, playful, humorous, and unpredictable. He is not afraid of revising his previous positions and extending his thoughts in surprising new directions. His trajectory is ongoing. I would now like to ask the Minister of Education and Research, Kristin Halvorsen, and Professor Bruno Latour to come up to the podium where the Minister will present this year's Holberg Prize and the Holberg Medal.
Minister, officers of the Ludwig Holberg Memorial Fund, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, wife, and friends. There is something slightly reassuring in having people like me receiving an award such as the one you have decided to bestow on my work today. Through sheer labor, ordinary people may achieve something that no one could have predicted from the way their mind works or from their personality. Having worried all my life about the fact that a white provincial male of bourgeois extraction and of limited intellectual skill could not possibly be the real target of a thought that had traversed his mind since he was 16, I'm totally reassured. Everyone is able to tackle problems of vastly disproportionate size and even have the good fortune, if not to solve them, at least to give them a more reasonable shape. Reassured that it's not me, but those slightly reshaped problems that are rewarded today, it's to them I may now safely turn. The first problem is that of the exact nature of the intellectual practices themselves. To think productively is often to make positive use of one's own limitation. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I turn my own incompetence into a revelation of how many skills the others had to learn. I still remember the complete puzzlement of my co-workers in the laboratories where Roger Guillemin had welcomed me at the Salk Institute in La Jolla, when they watched me attempting to stabilize the bioassay for melatonin. They kept wondering, how can this guy be so hopelessly clumsy at cutting frog skins and handling pipettes? And yet, this clumsiness is also what, in large part, has allowed science studies, the field I'm so proud to belong, to offer a vision of science that has brought it down from the Empyrean domain of epistemology to the most realistic ground of laboratories, instruments, institutions, and more broadly, what we call in our jargon, socio-technical networks. Thanks to this description of thinking, cognitive skills have been foregrounded at last. It's precisely because it's so rare, so difficult, so costly, so risky to collectively reach objectivity that science, that is, science in action, should be admired, cherished, and carefully cultivated. I don't think it's arrogant of our part to say that before science studies, there existed very, very few detailed accounts able to bring into full view the whole array of resources that are necessary for the achievements of science. That of a few of his descriptions, including mine, passed for an attack on science, proves at which point some scientists and philosophers of science had lost sight of their own values and tossed out the practical ways of reaching the very objectivity they clamor for so loudly. Which leads me to the second point that I had to face because of a noisy reaction to the development of science studies. We had to recognize that in a given collective, there would be more than one way to detect the truth. Such is the enterprise to which I've devoted half of my life. How many ways are there for a Western collective to recognize the differences between true and false statements, once freed from the highly simplified version of objectivity that I call double-click? In the same way as the Norway landmass has been slowly rising only with the retreat of its glacier, the other truth condition necessary for a collective to be civilized cannot rise without the excessive weight of rationalism melting away. And by rationalism, I mean double-click. No definition of truth can lord over all the others without losing its integrity. Such is the pluralism that is so integral to the Western project, but that the moderns are very badly protected against corruption. Contrary to what is often said, the result of my work and that of my colleagues, and here I include great predecessors such as Ludwig Fleck and Thomas Kuhn, as well as my friends and mentors, Michel Serres, Lauren Daston, Mike Lynch, Michel Callon, Anne-Marie Moll, John Law, Isabel Stengers, Donna Haraway, Simon Schaffer, and many others, some of them are here, without whom I will not be here today. The result of our common work is that we have attempted to free the scientific enterprise from the excessive political moral weight that had been loaded onto it. Then, but only then, other highly rational threads may be followed with the same care and caution as in the case of science. In law, in religion, in fiction, in politics, in literature, in mythology. It is to such an inquiry into modes of existence that I intend, with your generous support, to devote the remainder of my career. I agree that it might seem provocative to claim that the search for this plurality of truth condition, even though it bears so little resemblance to the dream of rationalists, is a way, nonetheless, to pursue the dreams of the Enlightenment. And yet, I have two lines of reasoning to believe that such an enterprise it is not so provocative as it sounds. The first from anthropology, the second from the new ecological situation. First, the anthropology. It's because philosophy is not abstract, foundational, or theoretical, but rather because it's a fully speculation. That is what I call a lust for the concrete. It's by practicing this style of empirical philosophy that I was led to the anthropology of the modern, a very strange project that is, of course, totally oversized for just one single ethnographer. And yet, it's not unfair to say that the modern, that is, those who have projected their anthropological inquiry over the whole globe, had not paid much attention to describe their own sets of practices. When I set foot in Ivory Coast in 1975, I discovered with great surprise that while ethnographers applied a bewildering set of methods to study rituals, material culture, genealogy, witchcraft, of the many ethnic groups that were being prey to a renewed extension of a French colonial enterprise, they were almost totally devoid of tools to study the very sources of this colonial enterprise itself, namely science, technology, politics, and economics. This is why I deemed it much more efficient and also much fairer to start from the argument that we had never been modern either. On this level playing field, lots of new sites opened up, of which science was only one, although, of course, the most tempting at first. Later on, technology, law, psychology had to be studied as well. And then, the most difficult one, the economy, the real source of a modern pretension to planetary hegemony. What we could not envision at the time was that the very development of the other part of the world would bring the modern, especially the Europeans, back to the local and peninsular situation from which they had started a few centuries earlier. Europeans were no longer in a position to serve as the sort of baseline for all the other people of the earth, had the fortunate effect of opening a new round of self-inquiry. What modernity had universalized much too fast, science, politics, law, economy, religion, psychology, the ecology, has thankfully shrunk to a much more reasonable size. If those domains and their values can still expand, this time they will have to do it with great care and by paying the full price of their extension. Which leads me to the second line of reasoning that may put this project of an inquiry into modes of existence, or what I've called an anthropology of the modern, into a more favorable light. The demise of the modernist project is not only due to the competition of other forms of modernization in Asia, India, Latin America, or even Africa. It's also because all those projects of development are now confronted by the realization that they will not be able to go much beyond what some scientists call planetary boundaries, a tricky term to point to a form of bounds and binds that are simultaneously ethical, religious, scientific, and political. Much as in Lars von Trier's film, Melancholia, the first globe, that is that of globalization, is being slowly and irreversibly crushed by a second globe that comes crashing into it. Paradoxically, the planet that is rushing forward to us is not a foreign planet, but the one out of which we are all born, and the one we should have considered much earlier as our only abode. The eruption of this new planet comes as a total surprise for which we are wholly unprepared, much like the unexpected eruption from 1942 onwards of the new landmass called America. We are at the point where many people are in utter denial that this planetary eruption is the defining moment of our time. It's like people were saying once again, just as in 1492, but it's China that you have discovered, nothing more, nothing new, nothing threatening. Of course, for the countrymen of Arne Naes, or indeed for those who, like us today, celebrate the memory of Ludwig Holberg, a writer able to bring his hero, Niels Klim, to an underground planet where trees not only have standing in court, but are also full citizens of what I could call a parliament of things, the eruption of a new planet inside our planet is not as surprising as it is, let's say, for the French or the American. But what is surprising to everybody is that the eruption of nature into politics, far from bringing about agreement and consensus, brings dispute, controversies, and even a new state of war of all against all. Yes, a new state of nature. That an appeal to nature does not pacify. That's what is new in the ecological situation we entered 2 centuries ago. It's precisely now that the redescription of a scientific enterprise becomes relevant. At no point in history have the sciences been so essential to the definition of our cosmopolitics. All the sciences, from agriculture to atmospheric sciences, from microbiology to volcanology, from computer model to good old systematics and natural history, without forgetting meteorology, for which the Bergen of Willem Bjerknes is one of the birthplaces. And yet, never has the authority of those many contrasted and often conflicting disciplines been so uncontested. You cannot bypass those disciplines, since without them we would remain totally in the dark about what is happening to the earth. And yet, it has never been easier to bypass them entirely, because of a sheer number of revolutionary decisions that we have to contemplate if we accept the science's frightening result. We are all in denial. That's why it's so important to rethink the Enlightenment altogether, not by switching off the lights or simply replacing our light bulbs, but by recognizing that the power of the science does not reside in putting a final end to discussions, but in opening them further. To reach closure, what is needed is politics, and maybe religion as well as morality. Strangely enough, objectivity has to be shared much more widely than had been thought necessary at the beginning of Enlightenment. Not by extending matters of fact, but by extending what I call matters of concern, another materiality altogether. The scientific enterprise will thrive just as well, nay, much better, in the new landscape of controversies and in the new politics of thing that we are all trying to outline. I remember my surprise many years back when I visited in Trondheim a place called the Thing, the old word for the gathering of those who are assembled because they disagree on what is at stake and which has to be settled nonetheless. I had not realized at the time that all things had to be drawn to this ding, and that parliaments such as your Storting had indeed to be vastly increased, not only to include trees, as Holberg had envisioned, but all the other creatures with which we are now in lasting conflict, plus, of course, those humans tied to this and that thing with whom we have to learn to be in conflicts until we reach peace. It's this extended parliament that a few years ago I've tried to outline in this exhibition with my friend Peter Weibel called Making Things Public. We wanted to give a new shape to the res publica. Ours is not a quiet time, to the point where it's impossible to locate oneself in it without calling it apocalyptic. How odd it is that some have announced that history had come to an end just when it's the earth that has taken up the task of being the most agitated agent of history. What is sure is that because there is no hope of escaping to another world, nor to relocate ourselves to another planet, we might at last see the relevance of bringing the range of inquiry listed by this prize, namely art and humanity, social science, law, and theology, into a much closer connection with what used to be called the natural sciences, a term now wholly inadequate to describe the common cosmopolitical task awaiting us. If I have to thank you for having granted me such an award, it's not, of course, because I believe myself worthy of such an honor, but because the problems that have come to me over the years might have relevance for you as well. To you, and more urgently, to my grandson, Ulysses, whom I wish to salute at this occasion, together with my close friend, my family, extended, my wife, and this large nurturing milieu of friends and colleagues without whom it's impossible to think a single thought, to utter a single word, to feel a single emotion. At the time when I have nothing else to add but words of thanks, allow me to gather all of them and all of you in the same gesture of gratitude.